Okay, we're live.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Gudjon Bergmann, and this is a webinar and panel in celebration of World Interfaith Harmony Week. We will be talking about a book and model that I wrote back in 2017 called Experifaith, which is called The Experience of Faith. The program is pretty simple. I'm going to take 30 minutes to explain the model. And then the panelists will join in a dialogue about the experience of their faith. And we will probably, or not probably, definitely all be enriched by the process. So let's meet the panelists before we go any further. If everybody could introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Reverend Esther Jones-Alley, and I'm located in Kent, right outside of Seattle, Washington. And I'm excited to be here this morning.
Welcome, Esther. Good to have you with us.
Hello, hi, Janice. Go ahead.
Hi, Steve. I'm Janice Fuchs, and I'm in Boerne, Texas, outside of San Antonio. And I'm very excited also to be here with everybody today.
Good to have you with us, Janice.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Swart. I'm here in Lexington, Kentucky, and it's a nice, cool, crisp morning, and it's good to meet you all, and I'm looking forward to this session.
Thank you, Steve. Good to have you with us.
My name is Gunnar Arslan. I'm in Austin, Texas, and I'm one of the founding members of the Dialogue Institute.
Great to have you with us, Gunnar. Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while.
Good to see you too.
My given name is Karen Noel, but I prefer the name Cherish, and I'm actually here on a beautiful sunny day in Asheville, North Carolina.
Good to have you with us, Cherish.
Hello, my name is Christine, and I am from Austria, and I'm looking forward to meeting you here on this place, and I'm looking forward to the dialogue.
Thank you, Christine. Good to have you with us.
Thank
you. Okay, is that everybody? I think so. Okay, so now to the Experifaith model. And so here's what I'd like you to do, panelists, if you can. While I'm going through the model, think about the experiences of your faith practices and see where they fit into the different categories that I talk about in the model, and kind of note what you would like to talk about. It looks like we'll have enough time to go 2 rounds. So what I'd like you to do first is talk about from your own perspective for maybe 2-3 minutes each about the experiences of your faith. And then as the other people talk, maybe note down some things that come to mind. They don't have to be the same. They don't have to be even similar, but sometimes it happens when the dialogue starts, when we start talking, then we realize, okay, this brings to mind this part of my practice or this experience that I had, and so on and so forth. So let me back up. In 2016 to 2017, I studied at All Faith Seminary International in New York, founded by Joseph Gelberman. Really back in the 80s, he had this vision of creating an interfaith ministry where all the faiths could come together and worship together and interact with each other. He was ahead of his time in many ways. Became very good friends with Swami Satchidananda down in Yogaville in Virginia. And he, set up this seminary so that people could study all the different religions. And I came into this from the spiritual but not religious group, which I had belonged to since I was in my early 20s. And I had this, which I learned later, mistaken thought that really all the religions were just teaching the same thing. Boy, was I wrong. But that point of view, though, brought me to look for the overlaps. Okay, so I started learning about the different religions. I started reading the sacred texts. I started going to different services, both online and in person here in Austin and the surrounding area. And I was both really looking into all the differences in culture and ritual and community and all the textual differences and all that. But I was also looking for, where are the overlaps? If there are any, where are they? And what I came up with for my final thesis was this concept of Experifaith, of the experience of faith, of that while, you know, the scriptures may be different, there are overlapping experiences because humans are the same, right? So humans have the same capacity to, you know, have the same body, the same senses, the same emotional capacity, the same intellectual capacity, and so on. But of course, you know, that wasn't enough. I like to think in big picture models, and so I ended up creating this simple model, which consisted of the infinity symbol, and then 4 categories of actions. And this is where I want to kind of ask you to see where your faith practices lie and so on, panelists. So if you take notes for this, that would be great. Or if you've already read the book, then you probably already have some ideas here. So I grouped the experiences into 2 major categories. One was the experience of oneness. And I found this mostly in what you'd call the mystical aspects of religion. Islam had the Sufis that went more for the experience. Hindus have the yogis. Christians have, you know, the mystics. Jews have the Kabbalists. And these are the people who are, who've read all the scriptures, who follow, you know, the rituals and all that, but they want to go deeper, and the outcome is usually a deep sense of oneness. I've categorized oneness in different terms. There's what I call symbiotic oneness, where everything is connected to everything else. There is what I call unity, where there is very much closeness of oneness, where you like the yin-yang symbol, where there's or closeness to God, or you feel one with another person or with another group. And then there is the non-dual oneness, where all is one, there is nothing but oneness. And it seems that this surfaces in some shape or form in most of the religions. And, you know, it's expressed a little differently. It's expressed with, you know, different words and all that, but it always points to this sense of oneness in one of these 3 major forms, in either symbiotic, unity, or non-dual. So that was one category. The other category that I found was the category of which I call goodness. And this is the, I would say, dual category, which most religions fall into, the aspiration for goodness and the restriction of behavior that is not perceived as good, right? And so these are the polar, the opposites that we're working with. Just living in the world is living in duality. It's, you know, it's left and right, there's up and down, there's back and forth. There's yes and no, there's good and bad, there's, you know, black and white. The duality is endless. And so in that, those aspirations are aspirations to be good, to do good. And then, of course, we get into definitions of what is good, what is goodness, what is bad, you know, what are we restricting and what are we aspiring towards? And that's where there's quite a bit of difference between the religions of, you know, what is the aspiration toward and what are we restricting? In Houston Smith's book, The World's Religions, and this I found interesting, he talks about that you know, we have now scoured the earth for remnants of human civilizations, and we have yet to come onto a civilization or a group of people that had no restrictions, right? So if total permissiveness was ever allowed, I think these were his words, if total permissiveness was ever allowed in any society, there are no remnants of that society. There are, there are no books, no rituals, there's no anything. So there's always this acknowledgement that there are certain aspects of being human that need to somehow be restricted. At the same time, there are beautiful aspirations in all the religions, and we see that in everything from Confucianism to Baha'i, from Judaism to Islam, from Christianity to Hinduism. And so this became, out of one come the many, and back into the one, everything. And that's how I started thinking about it, that this was an endless loop of, we return to oneness, we come into life, into duality, and it's just, that became my thinking process there. But that's not necessary for anybody else to accept as this, but I found that these two groups, and here's another thing I found, that if you want to compare religions, don't go too deep, right? It's the same with anything. If you start going too deep and start defining things too much, even people who generally agree will start to disagree, right? If you start, peering too deeply into the philosophy of it, or peering too deeply into what the word means. Like, you can have discussion groups about a passage in a scripture in any religion, and if you start going too deep, you'll have disagreements. But if you stay on, and talk about the generalities, you will have more consensus. So that's also why I chose to approach this from just these two groups of the aspect, because these were experiential. These were not, I was not trying to, explain everything about religion. I was just focusing, what are the two main experiential aspects of religion? Do I go into solitude? Do I become a monk or a nun or a sadhu or a guru or a Sufi? Do I go into my own experience of oneness? Or do I go into the world and try to approach compassion and love and service and being there for others and creating community and so on? And so I found that these two things, yes, people can practice both, but one usually becomes dominant, and the oneness path is reserved for the few. I mean, there are few people who do that as a path of really non-attachment to the world and just retreating into a sense of oneness. But there's always that group in every religion. It's very interesting to find that there's always this group of people who seek solitude, who seek to go inward more than go out. And so these two groups became my focal point. So I thought, what are the groups of activities that people would engage in? And I decided to just focus on 4 groups and, again, apply it generally so that you could find more consensus. Instead of going too deep, I went general. And so on the oneness side, I found that there were 2 things that were generally done. Again, thinking of oneness both as symbiotic, unity oneness, and non-dual oneness. The 2 things were, there was some kind of experimentation. And what I mean by experimentation is that there was a practice of some sort that was applied, and then a group of practitioners, much like a group of scientists, would come together and talk about what that did, and then with time, they would become the traditions of that group, right? So we come together and we pray. We pray how? We pray in a certain way. And this is how, and then this group decides this is how we pray, because this is our experience of praying this way, is that this is the best way to pray. Or we get instruction from the prophet of our religion, that this is the best way to pray. And so we apply that, but we apply that, and it's an experiment because we're looking for how does it make us feel? What do we, really, what are we getting out of it? And how can we emphasize that and lift that up in some way? Another experimentation would be meditation. Another experimentation, for example, in pagan rituals, or Native American rituals, would be sweat lodge or something like that. So there are different types of experimentations, and their goal always seems to be to bring people closer to their belief, that bring people closer to either the deity of their belief or the the focus of their belief, whatever that focus is. And so if you think about it in your life, panelists, is what are the experiments that you engage in to draw yourself closer to your religion, your faith, your practice? That's something to, in my case, it's been meditation has been my go-to experiment. And belonging to some sort of group of people who also meditate has been invaluable, because it gives me a sense of their experience compared to my experience. And that brings us to the second category, is that there's always some kind of contemplation on the oneness side. There's some deep thinking about what this all means. And people come together and they debate and they go deeper and they think about and they read the text and then they talk about it. And so again, reserved for the few, because not everybody wants to go there. Not everybody wants to think too hard about this. But there are in every religion groups of scholars who really know and understand their religion. And so the contemplation part is super important. Now, you could put contemplation also on the goodness side, right? Because you can, contemplate morals, contemplate, aspirations, contemplate restrictions. So there's not really, it has to be on the oneness side. It's just my visual when I put this together was that, contemplation was more dominant. When people started really going deep, then they had this need for some kind of deep philosophical conversation in relation to their experiences of oneness. Now, on the goodness side, the two main categories, and I decided to focus more on aspiration and less on restriction, but the restriction certainly is there. But the two categories are really interrelated. One is love, and so the aspiration towards love, elevating the feeling of love, encouraging the actions of love, being more compassionate, being more giving, forgiving, and so on. And then there's the action of service. And this I found really interesting when I looked into it, that I really can't find a single religion or spiritual group or anything which doesn't at some point start focusing on service. It was, and so that really expression of love, expression of compassion, expression of connection comes through service. Now, once I had this, I really had to sit with it for a while, think about what it meant and so on. And so I ended up writing a thesis, and that thesis ended up becoming a book that is now available called Experifaith at the Heart of Every Religion. I could probably have benefited from more interaction with more people, which I've since gotten, and I've probably added quite a bit. If I would write the book today, it would include a lot more. than it did when I wrote it back in 2017. However, the core framework seems to have withstood most scrutiny. Probably not all, but most scrutiny. What I found most interesting, though, was how it helped me talk to people of all faiths. Is how I could, if I really focused on one or all of these aspects, I could really connect with a person. I've gone to numerous interfaith gatherings, and if I focus on the experiential aspect of people's belief system, it's astounding how first of all, I can get them to talk about it. Because everybody, if people are willing to listen to other people's experiences, there's something beautiful just there, right? But also how much of a connection I've felt to people of all different faiths when I get them to talk about their experiences. And I've done this Experifaith dialogue with a few groups over the years. And, it's not always the best dialogue, but it's always what comes out of it is this sense that people have really been heard and that people have found certain overlaps because, again, we all have the same tools to experience with, right? We all have the same human, tools and also limitations, right? And so that's where I want to take us today, is into the, first monologues. I'll ask you to do monologues, and then maybe a second round of monologue where you talk about, and then if you want, if we have time for a third round, we could start saying, hey, Janice, hey, Gunnar, hey, Cherish, when you said that really resonated with me this way, right? Here are the key elements to doing this without it becoming theologically deep, right? We want it to be experientially deep, but not theologically deep. What do I mean by that? So focus on expressing your own experience. Yes, you can absolutely reference your scriptures and your faith and everything, absolutely. But try to focus on expressing how you've experienced it. Krista Tippett, who has the podcast On Being, she wrote this beautiful passage where she said, another person's experience can never be wrong, right? Because it's another person's experience, right? And so once you focus on the experience, it's not about right or wrong. It's just I'm talking from my own experience. So let me give you an example. If I say, when I meditate, and then I fill in the blank with how I feel, what that does for me, how it changes my day, how it affects my routine, and so on and so forth. When I express myself from that point of view, it's very different from when I start talking about what the scriptures say about meditation, right? So if we can focus our expression, our communication, our first monologues and then dialogue on those aspects of how we feel, what it does for us, how it affects our interactions with other people, and so on and so forth, that would be really, really beneficial and would fit well in with the Experifaith process. So, first round, I would ask you to choose any one or more of those really 6 categories. We have oneness, we have goodness, we have experimentation, any kind of experimentation that you do, any kind of contemplation, any kind of love, and love can, again, be how you lift up the feeling of love and how you then express love in your interactions with other people and with yourself. And then with with service. And so when you have those 6 elements, you can choose really anything within that, and then focus on expressing yourself from a standpoint of experience, first and foremost. When I do this, I experience this. That influences me, my day, my interactions with other people in this and this and this way. That helps me to do this. That helps me to do that. That helps me, listen this way, or take care of myself this way, and so on and so forth. So, are we ready to begin the process here? Everybody raise your hand if you're ready. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So, round one, about 2 minutes each. Choose an aspect, one or more, and just tell us about your experience of doing it and how it has influenced your life. Round two, when you're listening to other people, jot down something that comes to mind that you want to add to what you said in the first round. And round three, we'll have a discussion more back and forth about, and point to this certain person, say, when you experience this, you can ask a question, you can, say, I found that too, or here's how I found it different in my experience. And so it's not about making the other person experience wrong. It's about adding to it and say, well, my experience of it is this. And always come at it from that point of view. And that makes it so that the dialogue is never about competing ideas of right and wrong, but about supplemental ideas of experience. So who would like to begin? Steve?
Okay, let me give it a shot here. So I guess in the in terms of experimentation, what I like to do is similar to your speaking of meditation. I like to play music, which is usually, I play the piano and I play some Bach or I play some Beethoven, and sometimes it is music that was written for the church, and sometimes it's other types of classical music. And when I do that, it brings me a type of relaxation and a meditation that really makes me feel wired into things. And I just find it very comforting. And then another aspect in service, one of the things I do is I work for Meals on Wheels, and I take meals out to generally elderly people who are disabled, and most of them can barely walk. And I bring them their meals, and sometimes that's the only contact they have with people during the day. And they're all so appreciative, and they're so kind that it really, it warms my heart. So those are two things that I do.
Excellent, Steve. Thank you. You can take a whole 2 minutes, or you can have it short and sweet. That's up to you. So who wants to go next?
I can go next if we want. So similar, one of the things that I do, what I've been working on lately is separating from my thoughts. So coming to the realization that my thoughts are not who I am. So I've been practicing observing them in a different kind of way. So one of the things that's helped me pre-COVID was that I ecstatic danced. And so that means that they really just play music and you just move to it. And you're very much in your body. You're very much sort of grounded in your body, and you just hear that music and you move to it. And you're sort of lost in things. Your thoughts sort of stop. And you're also paying attention to your body in a really big way. And you're paying attention to every little, not nuance, but every little, every little tiny sense of my body wants to do this and that, and little tiny, you're really tuned into yourself. That's the way to say it. And then one of the things, and again, pre-COVID, that I'm so missing is that we have a community here in Asheville, and it's led by the Haywood Methodist Church. And they call themselves a church of yes, which means that they still do have 2 meals, but the meal used to be, you'd sit, I think it was with 8 people around a table. You could be anybody. Homeless, not homeless, you're clergy, you're whatever you are. And you sit at this table with a tablecloth, cloth napkins, handmade plates, glass dishes, and people come and serve you. And it was just the most beautiful way to sort of honor other people where they were at. And just, a lot of times most of your table would be people without homes. And so you were giving them respect in a beautiful way and hearing their story that they were an EMT and they got sick and all of a sudden they're on the street. And so it was just the sweetest. I miss it so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherish. Okay, who wants to go next?
Anyone? I can go next.
Go
sure. Yes. So, when I listen to you, everything you mentioned has some, speaks to me. So there is, it's hard to pick one. Obviously, as you said, I feel myself more heavy on one side rather than the other. For example, goodness and oneness. We're supposed to, I'm from the Islamic tradition, and the way we look at it is that the day is created for goodness and the night is created for oneness. So that circle, that infinite circle you mentioned, for me is like a daily 24-hour period. So during the day, you go out and serve people. And the way I like to do that is actually part of a movement called the service movement. This is a movement started by the Turkish scholar Fethullah Gülen. It's literally called hizmet, which is the word for service in Turkish. And we're trying to it's a worldwide movement, millions of people, and attacking the 3 areas: poverty, by charitable helping people, ignorance, education, opening schools all over the world, and division in society. And that we try to resolve with dialogue. And that's kind of what I'm more focusing on. That's how we got to know each other. I'm part of this organization here in Austin called the Dialogue Institute. So that's kind of my service aspect. And then I follow the Muslim practices of praying 5 times a day. To me, that really is essential, especially life in America, in the US, is so hectic. Days are going so fast. I'm from Turkey again. It's slower there. You can separate one day from another. Here, it's not. Everything moves so fast. Everybody moves so fast, and you're kind of going with the flow. And in the middle of the day, you hear that call to prayer coming from your phone or from my clock, and you're like, okay, wait, yes, there was another thing. There was God, and there was more important things than just doing my next project or meeting the deadline. Stop. And then you take your time, even if it's just 5-10 minutes, just sit down, stay in front of God, bow, go to prostration. To me, that's kind of centers me back to the important aspect of my life. We believe that's the reason we are created is to worship God. That's kind of our main purpose. But then you tend to forget that purpose, and these 5 daily prayers bring you back. And then Ramadan is coming up in a couple months again. This is where we focus on oneness more to get even closer to God, and oneness in all 3 aspects. I mean, you start as God being that other thing, and you're trying to get closer to it, but eventually the Sufi tradition says there is nothing but God. I mean, we are nothing really. We are just kind of reflection on on a river flowing down of God. See, I'm just vanished. We don't mean anything compared to God. So I can talk about all these different aspects, but that would take more than 2 minutes. So I'm going to stop here.
Well, thank you, Gunnar. You can expound on that, in the second round and so on. But thank you. I really appreciate you and our friendship here. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
Hi, I'm Leslie. I'm live in Atlanta, and I'm Jewish. In terms of the goodness and oneness, so Gunnar, thank you for sharing, because so much of what you said, actually everyone has kind of resonated with me as well. And that I think I do agree with the universal principles that seem to exist among religions. And one of the things that I do is I do a lot of interfaith work. And so I very much value the connected values that we have, particularly around the goodness and service. And for me personally, and actually, and Gunnar, I really like your, when you talk about being so busy, I feel like I've really struggled with that. So I may adopt your tradition and graft it onto my own in terms of creating some spaces for myself for prayer. As a Reformed Jew, we are definitely more focused on what's called tikkun olam, which is repair the world. So we're very service focused. However, I also have a great, and so I like that idea. During the day, I do service, and at night you do oneness. And so for me, I really rely a lot on my service during the week and during the day, and then my rituals through Shabbat and being together with others and being in the temple are really, really powerful for me. I'm a tactile person. I really love the Torah, and I love the rituals and the connection and the kind of the sameness and that creates that sense that Steve was talking about of relaxation and kind of connectedness as oneness, that I can focus on those ritual prayers and processes, and it just allows me to step away from myself and into a larger, deeper tradition that goes beyond myself, right? That represents a history and a people that ultimately is very universal. And I really do see it from a universal perspective. I feel like we all have our own, I personally believe strongly in, we all have our own personal experiences, and by walking through the weeds, going deep, we eventually come back to universal at some level, right? Like I think that you really end up there. And I really, one thing that's powerful for me in regards to driving both my service and what I do, and I do a lot of different volunteer and connectivity work. Right now I'm helping an old woman she's not old, she's actually really just disabled and her floor is falling in. So we're trying to repair her floor so she doesn't become homeless. But then I also work on other volunteer projects through my temple as well. But when I sit in those things are powerful for me. I find the divine in others, and that's what I look for and try to relate to. And it helps me find the divine within me. And for me, that's, I need that reminder. And I find it reflected through other people and other people through their eyes. And I know this sounds kind of crazy, but in caring for others, I care for myself. And that's really what's kind of powerful and important for me, and how that sits within my tradition of Judaism, might look different than it does in others, but because there's that power, that's important. And then the other piece for the rituals for me is that I really enjoy my Torah study and being in community with my, with others like today, to talk about experience and learning and connectedness to the oneness and ultimately to each other. And that is, I just think there's so much power in our connectedness in this world, and that we're stronger together, however we find those connections. So for me, that's why I'm, that's the, I probably haven't articulated this in the 3 categories that you had mentioned, but that's what my experience is that I have probably a harder time with the oneness. I'm really into the goodness connected part. That's really my seat. And in my tradition, I remember my rabbi would say, you know, there's different ways of being Jewish. And we do have a tradition of Kabbalah, and we do have a tradition of, you know, in some of our Orthodox communities where that's what they do, is they do an enormous amount of prayer and connectedness in that realm and the meditation. And then, you know, some studies considered holy in Judaism. And then others like myself are more kind of outward focused. But it's good to be reminded to come back to the oneness and connectedness in a quiet way rather than just an active way. So thank you for this time to.
Thank you, Leslie. I really appreciate you coming on with us. Thank you. And you're right. I mean, people are drawn to it differently, and people have different personality traits, and people, and I love that. There are different ways of being Jewish. There are different ways of being in all of the religions. And when we are allowed to express those elements that come naturally to us, that makes us bond stronger with our faiths. Okay, who wants to go next? Christine?
Yes. Yes, I come from the Christian tradition, and a little bit later, during a crisis, I started the meditation, the Zen meditation, and that has changed my life. I experienced the oneness there, and I could then better understand that what I have been told in the church. Regularly go to church for children, but then I had the feeling I could better understand what is saying there. And then I experienced that I get connected more with my pain, and the more I get connected with my inner pain, the more there comes the wish to do caring for others. And I felt that my heart gets more opened than before. And since then, I regularly practice meditation every day. And I also do volunteer work. I work as a being with dying people, and also in the counseling of mourning people. And then, yeah, the word compassion was so important for me. And then I thought, or I experienced that I'm more able to be there for other people, because I feel grounded, I feel embodied, and I feel that I'm more opening for my heart, for my suffer, for the suffer of others. Yes, and since then I followed my path, what my heart was saying, also in that I quit my job and started to start my work from the heart, that I'm here in the therapy for other people, and also started to mindful practices for children and so on. Yes, and then I get thrilled by my vision to build a place for people that they're able to start meditation and to go for caring. So I started a vision to build a house of compassion for people who wants to go this way, or who are lost, or who are not connected with them anymore. Yes, so I think it was a path from inward, and then it goes outward. So
excellent. Thank you. That's yeah. Thank you, and thank you. when you spoke, because you closed your eyes and you went and you were really extracting your experience. Thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And we have Janice and Esther. So, Esther?
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
I grew up in the Christian tradition, and at 23, I had a near-death experience which changed my whole outlook on religion, and so I kind of vacillate between the two, oneness and love. I spent my life as a lifelong student studying all the different religions, but also studying how the intersection between science and spirituality. And because of my experience in coming through that near-death experience, I've not really found a religion that I can belong to, because I always feel like it limits me. And so I'm a nun, and but I do have practices that I do on a daily basis. I don't meditate all the time, but I do meditate when I feel the need to meditate. I do morning prayer, and that's for me to have a conversation with my higher self. I believe that I really strive to always come from a place of love in all that I do. I think that's the greatest power, the greatest gift that we've been given, is to love one another. It's not always easy, but it is worth the effort. And I love working with people. So I do an abundance class a circle that I do with a group of friends. And I volunteer my time to teach that. And yeah, I'm a perpetual student. I love learning. I love learning. In fact, I stood up and read your book last night because I wanted to know what you were talking about. But yeah, that's where I am. I like to experience things, and I've had some amazing mystical experiences in my life. So, but I also love love.
Excellent. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
And Janice?
Okay. I think of the four areas that you talked about. I think for me, the beginning was experimentation to get me to appreciate maybe more the other three, if that makes any sense. I grew up in a non-religious home, but I think there was something in me that was always looking, that there was something missing. And I can remember at 14, and back then you could get a driver's license at 14 for some kind of a hardship thing. So I did, and I took my two younger sisters and myself to a church. Now I can only imagine what all these people thought when these three young girls come walking in and sitting down and they've never seen them before. So so I think that there was always a piece of me that wanted a connection that I didn't have when I was growing up from my parents. So I spent my young years not connected, but doing certain kinds of service work, and nothing very significant, I think, at the time. But anyway, looking for that connection. So when my husband and I married, I joined the Catholic Church because that was his tradition. He grew up in the Catholic Church. And that was good for me in that phase of that experimentation to learn about that tradition. And for a long, long time, it seemed to fit. You know, I mean, there were things that I learned. There were beautiful traditions that were, and I now became part of a huge family at that time, not only in the church, but from my husband's family. So that there was a connection then that I felt that I didn't have before. However, in 2006, I was relieved of my job. And for some reason, that particular moment in time was the perfect jumping off time for me. And I became so possessed, I will say. And I started reading everything I could get my hands on about religion, about spirituality. I could not get enough information. And I had a notebook and I took notes, and I asked questions of people that I could ask questions of, but where I was living at the time was very insular, very difficult, I guess, to find people who had different thought processes and different traditions that I could ask questions of. So anyway, I think that experimentation, that learning through all of that reading helped me understand what oneness could be, what a different kind of love, a different kind of service, a different kind of being could be. Kind of makes me teary-eyed for some reason. I'm not sure why. But after I had done that for several years, and I became a lot more connected to God. I was hearing God, and in my journal, I could hear very specific things. And I would go back and reread those. And honestly, the handwriting that I had when I was writing those things that I was hearing looked different than if it was just coming from me. So I knew that it was not me. It was the divine. And but at some point, though, I did hear very specifically, stop reading. And I had to stop reading and start experiencing what I was reading. And so for me, that has just been a very powerful thing to get to those other things you were talking about, the oneness and the understanding the goodness in people and trying to see the divine in people, and which does enlarge me when I can do that. Now, sometimes it's a real struggle. And I do pray, excuse me, I do pray. I do try to meditate, although I'm not very good at it. But even being outside and seeing God in nature and feeling that from the sun, from the trees, and from all of it is just, I don't know, it's part of that connectedness that I have now that I did not have when I was younger. So that's kind of where I am now.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you for sharing. The metaphor that was used for me, because I like reading too, was that you can be at the train station and you can read all the booklets and you can talk to all the people who've been on all the trips, or you can actually go and take a trip,
I think I've been on a trip ever since.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a combination. I think that reading, preparing, coming back, understanding, and all that. So let me just briefly share, because I feel like I need to share too, because all of you have done such a fantastic job of sharing your experiences. So from when I was in my late teens, I was attracted to oneness. I had this powerful spiritual experience when I was 19. and it both pushed me away from spirituality because nobody could explain what happened, and made me attracted to spirituality because I found that there was really something quite amazing there. Over the years, I've been more attracted to oneness, contemplation, meditation. And then I became a father. And then we moved to Texas. And then I decided that my kids were the most important aspect of life. And so for the last 10 years, I've worked on the side, but mostly been a stay-at-home dad. And that has really taught me something about love and service that nothing else really could. It really, I'd been in spiritual circles before where we talked beautifully about love, and everybody was, exalted and everything. But sometimes love is just, waking up at 5:30 and making lunch and being there when, my daughter is starting puberty and my son is going to college and knows everything. And, and it's being there and loving and forgiving and so that really has little by little drawn me out of my shell. Drawn me out of this inward focus, and helped me pull myself into doing things like this and going to interfaith events and helping neighbors and helping people instead of just focusing on my own experience of oneness, which can again be very deep and very almost addictive, because it's so rich, it's so deep, it's so it just gives you a sense of being, and then you have to go and make dinner. And why am I making dinner when I can, be one? and so it's balanced it out nicely. And interestingly enough, last year I was diagnosed with tinnitus. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a constant ringing in the ears. And so my deep experiences of silence, which I had experienced numerous times in meditation, were taken from me. And so there's no silence in meditation anymore. And so that completely changed. And it really, when I look back at it, it really added something to my meditation practice. Because I could be still and still there was noise and everything, but I can still find that sense of being. And there's no, it took away all the goals. It took away all the, if I just achieve this. Now it's just like, oh, if I can achieve a moment of peace here, a moment of peace there. If I can just be in spite of the noise, that, and it is, it's difficult, but it has enriched the meditation practice itself. My experience right now of oneness and goodness have been my own practice and being with my family here, and then feeling the need to expand that. That's really what's been going on in the last few years. So let's take we have like half an hour left. So let's just do a second round, which will be a combination of the two things I talked about earlier, which will be what came to mind when you were listening to the other people about your own experiences, and do you have anything that you want to ask somebody else or that you want to comment on from your own experience? Always from your own experience, not in another way. So if we want to go another round, we can do 2 minutes each or less. And if you want to talk to somebody or ask somebody a question, feel free to do that as well. So who would like to begin the second round? Janice?
Yeah, I have a comment too that I want to add to what I'd said earlier. So in some of my growth process, what helped me was having two very dear friends that we would meet for coffee, and it would go on for 3 hours, talking about spirituality and questions that we all three of us had, and then challenging each other in a loving way, not a bad way at all, but to what about this and what about that, and this is the way I see it, and this is the way I see it, and so I guess, and I think what almost all of you have said about being in groups that help that process, that help you see things, hear things differently, to add to that richness and that growth process, I guess, if you will, for lack of a better word. So I guess I would just ask if any of you would want to comment on those experiences maybe that you've had that might be similar.
Leslie?
Thank you, Janice, for sharing. So to answer the first question first, and listening to everyone and kind of what that triggered for me is that I actually grew up Christian and converted to Judaism as an adult. So I also went through kind of a process of discovery and exploration and reading and studying. And I came to kind of a point that I believe there are many paths to God, but you kind of have to pick one. But that all those paths are valid, and that, you know, that I don't get to define that for anybody but myself. And so I found that, and one of the more moving moments for me was when I was 13, I went to Dachau on a school trip. And in that moment, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is a very Christian, very kind of Midwest town, you know, Midwest space. And so going to Europe was a huge eye opener for me, but then going to Dachau and seeing the level of both our worst angels, evil. I feel like I saw evil personified for the first time. And I think what really struck me is that humans did that, right? That we had the propensity for that, but that we also had this enormous propensity for resilience and love and protection. And so that experience at 13 really kind of opened my brain and ultimately my heart to wanting to learn more about other people's experiences and other religions and whatnot. And it also really kind of forced me to grapple with that issue of good and evil, and to lean into trying to understand all those better and how different people cope with it. And so one, I want to acknowledge, and Esther and Janice, you guys, all of, I think, and even Christine, all of you kind of talked about that path of struggle and learning and going through. And I that resonates deeply with me in terms of some of my own challenges in life, and that struggle to understand why bad things happen to good people, to people. Gave me a level of love and gave depth and to the concept of love and compassion in a way that makes it more real to me in an everyday setting, right? That when I'm not in a place of judgment, but in a place of love and looking for the divine in others, that it opens me up to that oneness. Like I said, I realize in this conversation as well that my meditative practices have fallen by the wayside, and I need to balance that out a little bit more. I miss them. But I also recognize that that allow me that more of that connection that manifests, you know, on both the 5,000 foot level as well as the 30,000 foot level, if you will. But I just want to honor that walk and study that you all have done, that all of us have, that process we've gone through. And then the other, and I realize that also in my own tradition, sometimes I get frustrated that in Judaism, we focus more on the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. And so often, unfortunately, in our tradition, if not our liturgy, we miss that love piece that you often find more abundant in Christian and at least in languaging and things of that nature, and like in my Christianity, or even in some of the Eastern religions, and certainly Muslim. And I sometimes struggle with that. Like, I want to bring more of that back in. It's there. It's just not always held up as much as I would like. So I also find myself again drawn back to those more universal concepts to try to incorporate that into my own practice and understanding. And Janice, your question about being in groups with people who disagree, one thing I absolutely love about Judaism is that there's a real tradition of discussion and argument. And the argument is holy, not from a place of trying to prove a point, but to, if you think you know something, go back and look at it again. That the process of understanding what God wants for us and what our Torah suggests is that it's a constant reevaluation of those precepts, and that being in what's called Havara for us is that we actually, that's encouraged, and it's one of my very favorite things, is to constantly hone and understand and re-understand, what my values are. How do I manifest them? Am I living to that, to my own standards? Am I missing something? And I can't see that for myself, and so I rely on my on others to reflect back on me from that place of love. But if it needs to be honest, if I need to have my feet held to the fire, right? Like, I need to have that space of atonement and correction as well. So that, but that's all manifest within the same process. That it's not an either or. It's that that all works together, and that it's all in balance. And that feels really important to me.
Well, because you mentioned it, Leslie, I talked to a man in California 3 years ago. So he's from Asia. He's a Buddhist. He moved to America and he married a Christian woman. So he became a Methodist. Part of he went to church for 20 years, and then he met a Jewish congregation, and he ended up saying, like, I still go and meditate with and go on retreats, Buddhist retreats, but he has converted to Judaism because he loves the two things: that we can argue. And that there's a great focus on social justice and service, and so that's why he ended up there. So I love speaking to people from all over, and this part of my journey has been to, somebody? Oh, let me call them, and we'll have a discussion. It's been interesting. So we only have about 22 minutes left, so if we can stick to the 2 minute, that would be great. Who wants to go next?
Steve will go.
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I want to make the comment that it's very interesting to hear about everyone's journey. Esther, that's quite a story about you being the perpetual student, and your journey is very fascinating. And Janice, with your going to the church and being on such a long journey. And it's interesting what you said about finding the oneness, where I've had a similar experience where I did a lot of reading and studying, but I haven't really gotten to the oneness part. So that's kind of inspirational to hear about that. And I think that, Gunnar, that was a good point about the reason that we're here is to worship. So it's very interesting to hear about everyone's experience, and this just makes me real glad that I am attending this. Thanks, Gudjon.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Wants to go next? Second, Christine, go ahead.
Yes, yes, I want to stick to the reading point. A lot said, yes, I have done a lot of reading, and I also like reading very much. And then one time I have read in a book, a Zen book, words like you can read more than 1,000 books but it's nothing to compare with one experience. So, and yes, and that is what attracts me so much on Zen. That's the experience in inward changes so a lot in the life, and that I could also experience. That has changed my family life. It's changed my life with my children, with my husband. And so I started to practice regularly, and the regular practice was the tipping point I experienced in my life. And that I would like to share again with you. And yes, and it changed the connectedness. As changed in the connectedness with me, then I feel more connected to a tree, to a stone, and to other people. It's like a tree is talking to me. So I felt, be loved, be loved. So that yes, that's why I like the model of Experifaith. That's the experimental is really the big, for me, the big treasure. And I also think that you all experienced something in a way that's great. Like if you are in a church, or if you do a ritual or like anything, or if you experience music, or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Okay, who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Yes.
So what resonated with me, there are many things and so many different stories, yet similar, but I heard love come up in several cases. And the concept that love is not just a feeling, but it's a verb. It needs action and a commitment. It's not something that you just feel that comes up, but you actually have to work for it. And that's a really central concept in the way I understand my religion, that I am supposed to work on loving all the creation, not just, hey, I like this person, and so I love him. Oh, that person, not so much. So actually, I guess all work is cut for ourselves, more about those people who we have a harder time loving because for whatever reason. And when I talk about this Rumi quote comes to mind. Your job is not to seek love. It's rather to seek all the barriers you put up in yourself against love. And this is kind of the Sufi tradition from in Islam. And I also want to get back to, I think Christine mentioned this inward and then going outward. I think that brings me back to this concept of day and night I feel like if I don't have that personal connection, the daily prayers, then worshiping at night when everybody is sleeping, getting early before dawn and connecting to God, that's kind of charges me so that I can, when the sun goes up, I can go about and actually do that commitment, love as a commitment, and actually reach out to people and work for people. And as you do that, like we're doing right now, you get even more charged in terms of activity, and you absorb that, and you feel like, oh, I need to do more to get closer to God. And then at night you kind of use that energy, so it's kind of feeding itself back and forth, and hopefully that will bring you closer and closer. And that's the Sufi tradition, is that this is a path, and you're supposed to, it's a lifelong journey, it never ends. And you're supposed to be improving yourself or improving people around yourself every day. And kind of that's the journey. Then that's what we call life. So just want to share that.
It's such a beautiful visual of the infinity symbol just in a daily cycle. I think that's what my takeaway is from hearing that from you, Gunnar. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying, Gunnar. It's so beautiful. I've, like I said, I've studied all of the religions, and I think my heart really resonated with the Sufi. But I also wanted to acknowledge Janice and her automatic writing. I've experienced where, well, I've had experience with the oneness, and when I, come back through, I write poetry, and that's not something I did as a child or learned in school or anything. It just started happening. And but in the poetry was answers for me, like signs to guide me. So I really resonated with what you were saying. I think it's so beautiful listening to each one of you and your experiences and your disciplines, your dedication to what you believe. And I think that's what it's all about, is finding your way to express your highest and greatest self. And so I'm really glad I got up this morning, because it's early here on the West Coast. To do.
Thank you for being with us, Esther. I
do this. So thank all of you for sharing your hearts. It's just beautiful.
It's really beautiful.
Okay, anybody else want to add?
Yeah.
Yes, Christine?
So as Gunnar said about the service of others and doing the love and for others, it reminds me that if we express our love to others, it's like the others become me. So as the others and I, we get one in doing that. So I feel it. And if you express love for others, it's like you do love for yourself. So it's one. You can't separate others and me. And yes, it's wonderful. And thank you, Esther, what you said. Yes. It's the greatest thing is that we now connect our hearts. And if we connect all our hearts while we're speaking from heart, then a greater thing then exists. We create something that is greater than every one of us now is. And that's why speaking from the heart is so powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine. And that's really what I've found. And thank you all so much for speaking so honestly and from such an experiential level and with such integrity. Not every Experifaith dialogue has gone as well as this one, but it always, there's something, as you say, Christine, and all of you have mentioned this, is when you talk from the heart, when you talk from experience, when you talk from something that is so innately you and so sincere, that is like you plucking a string on your guitar and it resonates with a string in somebody else's guitar. And just there's something that happens, there's a harmonic resonance there where people, and it doesn't matter where they come from or what their background is or what they believe, but when they speak from that perspective, that resonates with another person because it's also in that. And for me, that's the beauty of having experiential dialogue and experiential faith-based dialogue, because while it showcases that people do different things, it also showcases that there are universals. or overlaps. Let's call them overlaps, because universals implies that they're all somehow the same, but there are general overlaps. And they can create a deep connection. Let me point out one thing that is interesting as well. If you share your pain with somebody and they've experienced a similar kind of pain, I've found that creates almost the deepest and quickest connection you can find. And like you said, Christine, when I got in touch with my own pain, I resonated with other people's pain, and I wanted to help them. That sounds like it was something you said, right? Yeah. And so that was but that's from an experiential point of view. Okay, anybody want to tie a bow on this? Anybody want to?
I just like to say where you talked about the resonance between, like when you pluck that string and then someone else, to me, that's the oneness, that's the connectedness of us all. And that's, you know, I think that's what make us all kind of connected in this universe. You know, we're like cells in a body. You know, we might do different things like the heart cell or kidney cell, but it takes all of us to make it work. So that's kind of what the picture that came in my mind when you're talking about plucking the string. And yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is very good.
It was beautiful, and something that came to my mind too is when we drop out of our heads into our hearts, and it's almost like you can see the string, the heart strings connecting. Then that shared humanity that Gudjon talks about so well is so much more evident, and it just enriches our own lives. And so it's just, for me anyway, getting out of my head into my heart and staying there more often.
And we just proved that we can make that connection even over Zoom.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
And across from Seattle to Austria, you know.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think that concludes our dialogue and discussion about Experifaith and this celebration of World Interfaith Harmony Week. I'm so grateful to all of you for taking time to be here with us. And I hope that you enjoyed this Experifaith dialogue as much as I did. I have an outline of it in my book if anybody wants to look at that. I also took together what I call a little book of Oneness and Goodness with quotes from various religions where there are, you know, interesting overlaps. And I've been hosting a dialogue group with those quotes, and those bring out the similar kind of thing with contemplation. If you bring out your experiences through the dialogue, there are interesting overlaps there as well. So yeah, this is my interest, and I'm so grateful for open-minded people who come from all these different traditions, who are willing to come at it from this angle. And let me just end on this. What I said earlier about connecting to the experiences of others, even if they don't know it's an Experifaith dialogue, is really when you meet people who have different ideas, different beliefs, different persuasions. If you can pluck your string and resonate with their string through experience somehow, if you can ask them and kind of guide the dialogue, just regular dialogue, in that direction. How do you feel about that? What's the experience of that? Where do you and how does that make you feel? How do you go about your day? How does that improve your day? So on and so forth. It's astounding where that can take you. So Experifaith is not just a dialogue structure for groups like this. as beautiful as it can be, but it's also just an approach that you can take in your interactions with other people of all faiths and persuasions. And I hope you try it out and see how it goes for you. Okay, that's it for now. So thank you all so very much, and bless you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Great meeting you guys.
Pleasure meeting everybody. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.